So, Dilruba Days was a memoir by Cathy, and Cathy had her memoir edited by Lois, and so I'm going to cover Lois's bio. And Lois Breger, excuse me, was born in 1944 and spent an idyllic childhood in upstate New York. After completing graduate school with a degree in library science, she moved to Denver in 1969. Lois wasn't seeking the spiritual life, but upon seeing a picture of Meher Baba, she felt a deep conviction of his divinity. After returning to New York in 1971, she visited the Meher Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Noticing that the book collection at the center's Sarosha Library needed organization, Lois offered to catalog and rearrange it. With Elizabeth Patterson's approval, she returned in 1972 to supervise the project with help from a group of enthusiastic volunteers, including Cathy Riley, who was visiting the center for the first time. In 1977, Lois moved to Myrtle Beach and was hired by Elizabeth to assist Kitty Davy at Dilruba, Elizabeth's home adjoining the center. She also helped Elizabeth and Margaret Craske, who came from New York City, to stay at Dilruba during holidays and summers. In addition, she worked with Kitty on editing her memoir, Love Alone Prevails, a story of life with Meher Baba, and presented programs in schools as an artist in residence with the South Carolina Arts Commission. After over 20 years in Myrtle Beach, Lois moved to Savannah in 2002 to work in an inner city library there. In 2020, she moved to a retirement community in Asheville, where she currently resides. And Diane's going to cover Cathy Riley's bio. Oh, you're muted, Diane.
You could be too good some of the time. So, Cathy Riley was born in 1948 and grew up in Valhalla. Am I saying it right, Cathy? But the Valhalla, New York. In 1972, while in college in the Boston area, she became an ardent devotee of Meher Baba. Upon becoming certified as a music teacher, Cathy moved to Myrtle Beach in 1979, and in addition to teaching, she began helping at Dilruba. As a singer and songwriter, she enjoyed participating in center programs. When Cathy realized her fortunate position of helping three of Meher Baba's close women Western Mandalay, she decided to keep a diary about life at Dilruba and Elizabeth's, Kitty's, and Margaret's vivid stories of being with Baba. While living in Myrtle Beach, Cathy met Tom Riley, an Irish storyteller and painter who had intimate contact with Baba in 1958 and 1962. After they married in 1986, Cathy continued teaching and helping at Dilruba, as well as performing at the center and as a guest musician at Baba gatherings in the United States, Europe, India, and Australia. After being in Myrtle Beach for many years, the Rileys moved to Asheville, but returned in 2016 to be near the center. Cathy's memoir, Dilruba Days, Life with Three Remarkable Women at the Meher Spiritual Center, was published in 2008. 2018, sorry. Tom's memoir, More Light, An Artist's Life with Meher Baba, was published posthumously after he passed away in 2022. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Do you both want to start?
Yeah. Lois is going to, well, we both have felt so fortunate and so blessed to have had this opportunity to have served Elizabeth Patterson, Kitty Davy, and Margaret Craske.
And I just wanted to mention, when we first came to the center and helped these incredible women, the center was such a magical time. This was in the 70s, and it was unbelievably, it was just so what we call magical. Baba's presence was so strong. And we were so fortunate that many of the Mandli were able to come and visit. Adi Keirani came 3 times, and of course Bal Kachuri came. Delia de Leon came from London. Rano Gailey came, and Katie Irani came to visit. So we were so fortunate. And of course, Darwin Shaw would come often and give talks and visit with people. And not only that, but we were also very fortunate that many, many professional dancers, musicians, and other guests would come and entertain us at programs. So we just remember how wonderful it was in that golden era when we were here helping. And started out in the 70s. We actually helped for almost 20 years. And not when Kitty passed away in 1991 was when our time on the center, we both felt that was when it ended for us. But of course, we love being on the center, and Cathy has lived here many years. I lived in Myrtle Beach for 20 years, and then it seemed appropriate to move on. But we would like to share some of our wonderful stories with you about our work.
Mm-hmm. And as we were talking about this whole amazing, fortuitous life we shared there at Dilruba, Lois and I were just remembering, we were the ages, how old we were, and just amazed at how old, much older, let's say, that Elizabeth, Kitty, Margaret were.
And we were in our 30s, and Elizabeth was in her late 70s. Kitty and Margaret, when we started helping them, were actually in their 80s, which ironically is now, Cathy's almost 80 in a few years. I'm turning 80 this month, and we are now the ages that they were when we helped them. And it just seems so full circle to us that that happened. So I'm going to start with some stories about Elizabeth. Well, a comment about Elizabeth. Yeah. Which is, I was actually hired by Elizabeth to work with Kitty, to assist Kitty. And I remember thinking when I was on the center before I came to the center for the first time as in the bio in 1971. And I didn't meet Kitty then. She was actually in India. I did meet Elizabeth, but Kitty was in India. And when I first met Kitty, I remember thinking, oh, Kitty needs a secretary. She's so busy and she has so much to do, and Kitty needs a secretary. Well, a few weeks later, I was the secretary. So Elizabeth asked me to come and assist with her. But the point I'm making is that I really did not have much contact with Elizabeth. She was kind of behind the scenes doing center work and supervising. And Kitty, if of course you knew her, she was helping people and talking with people and working with people. So all I remember about, my only comment about Elizabeth is a friend of mine once said to me that she felt like she was in the 4th grade and Elizabeth was the principal. And that's exactly how I felt. I was just kind of shy around Elizabeth, but she had a very incredible, witty, dry sense of humor, which Cathy will tell you some stories about that. But she was wonderful, but she was kept to herself and did her behind the scenes work. So I was mostly with Kitty, but we're going to start with stories from Cathy about Elizabeth.
So when I came to work there in 1979, Elizabeth was in her, late 70s. And one day, as I was sitting in Kitty's book room in her office and looking for something, Kitty wasn't there. So I was sitting in the seat Kitty usually sat at her desk. And all at once, Elizabeth slowly walked in, sat down at the desk, behind the desk where the visitors sit. And it just struck me as funny that I was sitting in Kitty's seat and there was Elizabeth like in the newcomer seat. So knowing that she liked me and that I could be a little, offhand, or I don't know, that I could just joke with her, I pretended to be Kitty and I said, "So I see you're a newcomer to the center. Um, do you have any questions?" And without missing a beat, Elizabeth very softly and with great power, she said, "No, dear, I don't have any questions. I only have answers." So that was one amazing story. When Elizabeth couldn't drive anymore, she would ask me to take her into the center to help her keep everything in tip-top shape. And one of my favorite stories is that she asked me to go to the linen little place that used to be next to the right of the carpentry area where Lee McBride and Joe Dunn now work, and Dean Nordquist. And she said, "I'd like you to get another pillow, please." So I got a pillow and a pillow cover, and then she had me drive to the lookout. And she says, "Now," and she got out of the car very carefully, and we walked slowly to the lookout. And then she said, "Now, Hilda Dale is coming to stay, and the lookout is her cabin, and I know she's writing a book. And I know that she likes to write sitting up in bed. She prefers that to writing at a desk. So put another pillow on the bed so that there are two pillows that she can write sitting up in bed." I mean, it just, her attention to detail was so fabulous, and what a great training that was. And as I think of that story and of Hilda writing her book, I just would like to extend an invitation to all of you who have met Kitty Elizabeth Margaret to please write your stories. There are so many beautiful stories that when our Dilruba Days book came out, people would tell me a story about Elizabeth Kitty Margaret, and I'd say, "Have you written it down?" And they'd say, So I'm saying, please write your stories. They are so important. So that's my little request. The other fabulous story, one day the phones were ringing off the hook. There was a line of people outside waiting to see Kitty. I was trying to cook a meal. All at once, Kitty said, "So-and-so is coming to stay. I want you to make another bed in the guest room." And so I rushed to get sheets. I put the bottom sheet on, and then I was too rushed, and I put the top on, the bed cover, and forgot the top sheet. And just as I was, I think, swearing underneath my breath because I was just upset and too overworked, Elizabeth quietly came into the guest room and sat down on the other bed. And I said, "Oh, Elizabeth, I'm so upset. I short-sheeted the bed, and now I have to start all over again, and I've got so much to do." And she just very quietly and beautifully said, "Yes, dear, that is what the spiritual life is all about. Finding poise in the midst of intense activity."
And I do want to add one comment that Elizabeth made that actually Cathy heard, that there was a man who knew Elizabeth very well in the community, because Elizabeth would go to church in the community and was very, very well known and in the community, very, very well respected. And this man, I don't remember who the man was, but he said to Cathy, "If Elizabeth Patterson asked you to go to hell, you would gladly go." Because she had that kind of dignity and respect. So I'm going to continue with some stories about Dilruba that Cathy mentioned, about what it was like at Dilruba with the phones ringing, and she was preoccupied and trying to make a meal and had to stop and make a bed. So we want to talk a little bit more about Dilruba and what it was like there. And it was endless visitors, and the visitors that would come to Dilruba, and this is daily, including Saturdays, Sundays, just all the time. Pretty much no day off. And Kitty and Elizabeth, and when Margaret came, really had no time off. But they were so happy to be with the people and help, and they loved being there and doing their work. But there were endless visitors, not only center guests, of course, but what Elizabeth called the nearby community of guests who come to the center just for visiting, or come to Dilruba to talk with Kitty or Elizabeth or Margaret. And just the residents would come. As Cathy mentioned, we both remember the telephone. In those days, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have cordless phones, but the phones would be ringing off the hook all day long, constantly. The doorbell would be ringing constantly. People coming and going, and in the book room and in the living room and on the porch, the screen porch, just waiting to talk to mostly Kitty. Sometimes Margaret, if she was there, and we'll talk a little bit about Margaret in a minute. But Elizabeth was more, as I say, behind the scenes, but people did make appointments to talk with Elizabeth as well. And a part of our work, there was Evelina Graham was there to help make meals, but she wasn't there every day. And so Cathy and I would fill in with meals and help make meals, and work with a lot of lunches and dinners, a lot of visitors for meals. We also took them on errands out into the community, to the bank and to the grocery store, and a lot of our work was doing errands. A lot of our work was also correspondence, especially with Kitty, where she would write letters to people, and I hope some of you have some of those letters. But Kitty would dictate the letters to us, and we would have to sit there and scribble it down and try to write it coherently, whatever she was dictating. And that was a lot of our work, especially Cathy did a lot of dictating. Now, poor Cathy got stuck with cleaning a lot. Kitty asked me to clean, and I am really bad at house cleaning, and I'm just really bad at it. So I was not up to Kitty's standards. And from India, Kitty and her training, she had incredible high standards about everything. And so poor Cathy got stuck with doing a lot of the actual housekeeping, cleaning.
I even remember thinking to myself, I feel like Cinderella. And one day Kitty even said, "Oh, there is Cinderella."
More of our care was when we first started there. There were 7 cats in the house, 7 pet cats. And we took care of Jane Haynes' dog a lot. Bo, Jane Haynes' dog, kind of lived over at Dilruba because Jane was so busy with center work. And then our favorite pet was Jimmy the Turtle. And Cathy will tell you a little bit about Jimmy the Turtle in a minute. Then Cathy was doing a lot of music programs, and Kitty asked me to do programs for children because I had a background in as a children's librarian. And that's, an unbelievable day that was like that every day. One of Kitty's favorite activities, when it was kind of quiet time in the evening, she would love to sit in the living room with a roaring fire. And the center workers always would, in the morning, would make up a fire so that Kitty would have a roaring fire to sit in the living room. She loved it so much that she would even have a roaring fire in June in South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, where it was pretty muggy, but they'd have the air conditioning on with the roaring fire. So that was fun to sit with Kitty by the fire, even in summer. So that just gives you sort of a general idea. Now, my first day, I'm going to talk a little bit more about being at Dilruba, and then we're going to talk about Margaret and more about Kitty. So on my first day of work in 1977, I went to Kitty, and she asked me to make lunch. She said 6 people were coming for lunch, and I said, well, what would you like me to have for lunch? And she said, she was in her book room, the office, and this is an early morning, getting ready for the day. And she said, now I'll always give you, we have a lot of people for meals, lunch and dinner. We have a lot of people. But she said, don't worry, I'll always give you a menu so you'll know exactly what to prepare. So I was very relieved to hear that. And I can cook, but I'm not a great cook by any means. They were they never asked Cathy and me if we could cook. They just assumed that we could cook, which I thought was funny. Anyway, so around 11, I went to Kitty, and she was in the book room, and I said, okay, Kitty, I need your menu so I know what to cook for these visitors, 6 people coming. And she was in the middle of something, and she very offhandedly, she just went like this. She said, oh, just look in the refrigerator, you'll find something. So that's, I went, okay. And I have no idea. I don't remember what I cooked, but that was my first day there trying to help. So
I'd love to. So Jimmy the turtle was, yes, he was a very important part of life there. And the first job that I would be asked to do was to go to the kitchen, take Jimmy out of his little Pyrex dish where he was on this little rock in the middle of some water, and the Pyrex dish down where the exhaust fan from the refrigerator would warm his little cold reptilian body. And Elizabeth gave me strict instructions on how to empty the water, replace it with tepid water, just not too hot, not too cold, put Jimmy back on his rock and into the Pyrex dish down near the exhaust fan from the refrigerator. And feeding Jimmy ice cream was another important part of my afternoon activities after I had cleaned the house. And so she would take Jimmy out of his little Pyrex dish, put him on that metal enamel table it's now out on the porch, and he would wait expectantly. I guess she had begun this ritual that Jimmy loved. Open the freezer, get the ice cream, get a big scoop of vanilla ice cream, aim it toward Jimmy's beak, and he would open his beak, and then you shoved the ice cream in, and then and then all the ice cream frothing around his cute little beak, and he would look very happy. Okay.
Supervised.
Oh yes, yes. So one day, yes, I think Margaret came in as I was feeding Jimmy his ice cream. She said, yes. Or maybe did Kitty said?
No, Kitty was feeding them the ice cream, and she got a phone call, and you came in to tell her she had a phone call.
Oh, and she said, yes, you supervise turtle.
No, you supervise.
It's her turtle feeding, yes.
2%.
And then Margaret came in after that, or another day when I was feeding Jimmy, and she said, yes, I could just see it now. Your letter to your parents, yes, I'm becoming very spiritual, feeding turtles ice cream at the Mayhair Center. So,
Okay. Our work was, that was like fun work. We're taking care of Jimmy. And my job was to take care of the 7 cats. And fortunately, I'm a great cat lover, as I'm sure many of you are. And so I loved that part of my work of taking care of the 7 cats and helping. They lived in the laundry room. They had little cat condos in the laundry room that were all stacked up. So I love doing that part of that. So another thing about Dilruba, being at Dilruba, and you got a little idea of how it sounds like pretty intense work, and which it was. And I remember Kitty once said to me, she said, you must be 100% dedicated or you wouldn't be able to stand it. And that seemed about right. It's really a lot going on there with that. And we, at some point later, after Elizabeth passed away in 1980, Jane Haynes, the director of the center, asked Cathy and me if we could start staying overnight with Kitty, because they didn't want Kitty to be alone in the house. So Cathy and I, for many, many, many years, we alternated a week on, a week off, and Cathy would be on a week, and then she'd be able to go back home. We both had our little apartments, and then I would be on for a week. So besides our day work, we were very fortunate to be with Kitty in the evenings. We'd come about 8 in the evening and stay overnight and leave about 9, 10 in the morning when other people, gradually other people started helping. It wasn't just Cathy and me, but we were the main ones doing the overnight work. And one of the ones who came most of the time would be Wendy Haynes Connor. And Buzz sometimes helped there too at night. But she was very, very wonderful, coming anytime. And Kitty had taken care of Wendy and Charles when they were little children, when Jane was working before the center became evolved. And so Kitty had a very, very strong connection, especially with Wendy and Charles too, of course. But a lot of our work when we were in our what we called night duty was in the middle of the night. We'd get all kinds of phone calls, and Cathy and I would try to answer so that Kitty wouldn't be awakened and talk to these people that were pretty nutty people. And they would call, and I remember one said, I need to talk to Kitty. I have a message from Meher Baba. And another time, someone, they would try to make center reservations in the middle of the night. And this very, very often, not every night, but very, very often. And Kitty would actually get on the phone with some of them. We tried to answer on the first ring. We'd be in our bedrooms trying to sleep, but we try to answer so that to kind of run interference. But very, very often, Kitty would get on the phone and she'd talk to these people for a long time. So that was interesting. But I remember one day I said to her, Kitty, why are there so many unbalanced people with Baba? And she said, oh, well, no one else will take them. So I'll never forget that. That was great.
Just moving to wonderful Margaret Craske, she would come from New York during her teaching breaks at Christmas time and in the summer. So we both had some wonderful times with Margaret Craske. So Lois has some wonderful stories.
Margaret, she always seemed like she was very austere. Her mannerism, her beat, just the way she carried herself, and she was a ballet teacher from New York, as of course you know. But she struck me as a little bit austere, but she had an incredibly wacky sense of humor. And when she felt like that she knew you, she would just say these incredibly funny things and just wacky, completely nutty. And one time I said to her, she was a bit of a health nut, even way back in the 70s and 80s. And one time I said, Margaret, it costs a lot of money to be healthy. And she said, she just shot right back. She said, costs a lot more money to be unhealthy. So, I went, no, that's true. And then she once told me she would sit with us and tell us stories on the porch. She loved to reminisce about being with Baba. She just loved doing that. And we loved that we were the recipients of that. And I remember Cathy would be out there with her a lot on the screen porch, and she would be telling stories, and she would also like to tell stories about Baba to visitors who came to talk with her. And of course her ballet students would come and talk with her a lot too. But she once told me that Herbert Davy, Kitty's brother, who was also a devotee in the early days, and she told me that Herbert once, she was with Herbert, and Herbert turned to Baba and said to Baba, isn't Margaret beautiful? And Baba gestured, Margaret has charm. And then she said to me, she'd rather have charm than beauty. And I thought that was very sweet. Yeah. So Cathy has some stories to share too.
One of the stories she shared on the porch one day, she said they went to a little circus in the middle of nowhere. They were traveling, and the elephant was doing beautiful tricks, and Baba was in this little funky little circus tent in the middle of nowhere, India, and at the end of the circus performance, Baba and the women went out into the night, and it was a full moon, Margaret said. And the way she told it, I just have never forgotten how magical it was, the way she told it. And she said the elephant was outside tethered, and when the elephant saw Baba approaching, this elephant started doing its dance for Baba in the full moon. And this huge elephant gracefully danced for Baba beneath the full moon in the middle of India. I mean, what an incredible story. I remember she said at night when they were going to sleep that the servants would sit, they would squat around these lanterns that were all often cracked and retaped, and they would be speaking probably in Marathi and Krishna, Krishna, and they were telling these stories to each other about Krishna in the night around the lanterns as the Western women would be wafting off to sleep. She was particularly helpful to me because when I first came there to work, I had this very grandiose idea that I would, stay forever and help Elizabeth and Kitty and, give up the world and be a celibate gopi. And so I sort of proudly must have shared that with Margaret one day. Somehow we were alone together in the book room, in Kitty's book room, and she looked at me like I was nuts, and she said, "You're young, you're vital, you're full of energy. This place is a nunnery. It's filled with old women. Go out there and do something in the world. What did you do before you came here?" And I said, well, I was a music teacher. She said, go teach music. It's very important. Go out into the world and people will hear about Baba from you and they'll become drawn to Mayor Baba. It's very important. And, I honestly, I don't think I would have tried to go back out in the world unless Margaret, just very strongly, exhorted me to go into the world. I was sort of wanting to retreat into this monastic life that I thought would be what I should do. One of the great fun times, I don't know, this happened quite a few times, was that Margaret would come into the
Or the living room.
into the living room or the kitchen. I would be cooking and she would come in and she would just either meow or start howling. And she would just, put her head back and ooh. And it was very inspiring. So I would start howling too. So woo. So we'd be howling together in the kitchen. And then she stopped and looked at me and I stopped and looked at her and she said, it's funny how our past lives come back to us sometimes. So that was great fun howling with Margaret.
I remember once Cathy and I, sometimes we were on duty together, not that often, but sometimes we were. And Elizabeth and Margaret were sitting in the living room, quietly sitting, just enjoying probably the fire. And Cathy and I were sitting there also. And Margaret started howling and Cathy started howling away. And Kitty's just sitting there, not quite knowing what to do.
I didn't know about that.
Oh yeah, you forgot that. And then she would meow a lot too. And I remember one time, like, meow really loudly. And one time there was an ambulance went by or a fire truck or something, and it was a siren. And Kitty seriously turned to Margaret and she said, "Margaret, are you meowing?" She got, anyway, cute stuff, very cute stuff. And of course, there were very serious times as well, but we remember the funny times, I guess, mostly. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit of some Kitty stories. Most of our work was with Kitty after Elizabeth passed away in 1980. And then
December 6th.
Yeah, that's right. December 6th, as a matter of fact. That's right. So this is appropriate. And then Margaret would come from the holidays from teaching ballet in New York. So she would come like at Christmas time or Thanksgiving. And she would also come for the whole summer, which of course we loved. But most of our work, when Margaret wasn't there after Kitty passed away, of course, would be with Kitty. So we're going to now talk about some Kitty stories. And one of our Kitty, there are legendary stories about Kitty being on the telephone. People talk about Kitty's phone calls and they remember them fondly. And Kitty had a very unique way of being on the phone. And when the conversation was over, she wouldn't say, "Oh, well, goodbye." She'd just hang up. And, you know, she just was on the phone a lot. And like I say, in those days, there were the phones right by the couch in the living room, or not even cordless phones. So there was a phone in the kitchen, in the living room, and of course her bedroom, our guest room bedroom that we stayed in. One of my earliest memories was Kitty. One of my, I guess, first couple of days I was there, and Kitty was on the phone. And all I could hear, of course, was her end of the conversation. And she was talking to a center guest. And after, I think it was a 2-week stay, if you had to get a permission to have your stay extended more than, wasn't it 2 weeks?
Mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
2 weeks. So obviously she was on the phone with someone who was calling to ask to extend their stay. And Kitty gave permission for the person to extend their stay. And she hung up the phone and she turned to me and she said, "He's in second heaven." And it was just so cute, you know, it was really sweet. And of course the person was thrilled to be able to extend their stay. Another time, actually another center helper was at Dilruba was Dana Ferry. And Barbara Katzenberg also helped at Dilruba. She did her work at the Gateway, but she also helped at Dilruba. But there's a story from Dana Ferry that she was once with Kitty, helping Kitty, and Kitty was talking on the phone with a new person who wanted to come to the center. And Dana remembers her saying, "Now be sure to wear covered shoes so you can walk on the snakes," but didn't explain anything about that. And you know, that Dana got a real kick out of that because I'm wondering what the other person on the other end was thinking about that. But that was cute anyway. Now. There was a phone story that I'm going to tell, and then Cathy has some others too. But when I first came to Myrtle Beach in '77, I was working at Sherry Art Press, and I was doing there was a small book room in those days at Sherry Art Press, which is now Sherry Art Book Room, but in those days it was actually part of Sherry Art Press, and before I was hired to help Kitty at Dilruba, that Elizabeth asked me, I moved to Myrtle Beach to help at Sherry Art Press. And I was in the book room, and part of my work was sending books to Kitty. And so one time I had packaged up the books that went to, because in the old days Kitty was allowed to sell books in the book room. And then
in her office.
In her office, which we all called the book room, because the books that were for sale were in there, and a lot of people got to spend time with Kitty because they came to get a book, buy a book. But then at some point that ended because it was a nonprofit, the center was nonprofit, and it was felt that selling books was violating the nonprofit tax status. But for many years, Kitty did sell books out of her book room. So part of my work at Sherry Art was to package up the books that she requested. And so I packaged up this big box of books, and I put an invoice in there so that she would always want an invoice so she could see which books were there and how many and what the prices were and everything. So I did that, and I didn't deliver it, but it got delivered to Dilruba. And at Dilruba, Kitty got the package, and the next thing I know, I'm in the Sherry Art book room, and the phone rings, and it's Kitty, and she calls me up, and she's very, very agitated, and she said, "Now, you must tell me. I can't read this. It's such a mess. She said, this invoice, I can't read it. Very British accent. It's such a mess. You must tell me who did this. I must know who did this. Who did this? And you must know. I must know. And I said, well, Kitty, I did. And she paused for a minute, and then she went, oh, I'm only joking. Ha ha. And then I explained to her that by mistake I sent her the invoice that I keep, that I was supposed to keep with all my notes on it, and that of course I would send her a clean invoice. But it was so cute. And she said, "Oh, I'm only joking, ha ha." Then Cathy has some stories too.
Well, I'd say my favorite Kitty phone story. We all knew that Kitty would talk on the phone, and somehow she'd often just keep talking and just hang up the phone. And everybody loved her so much that it was just part of the one more reason to love Kitty, you know. So I called one day, Kitty talked for a minute, and then she says, "Oh, just a minute. I hear Jane calling. Just a minute." And then I heard the phone going, down onto the desk, and I heard her feet leaving the book room, leaving her office. And then I waited, and I just decided, well, I just keep waiting to see if she would remember instead of hanging up. I don't know, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Finally, I hear her feet coming back into her office, her book room, and then I hear her starting to converse with somebody. I realized there's somebody there waiting for her. And this whole conversation ensued. "Oh, yes, so tell me your name." "Oh, Joe Smith." Oh,
Baba.
whoa, you've changed your name. Oh, Baba's part of this too. He's the most important part of this. Thank you, Baba, for showing us your feet here.
He wasn't on the phone. He was in the book room.
Yeah, he was in the book room. I'm sorry. So, yeah, okay. So this fellow was in the book room. I was listening to Kitty talk to this fellow in Kitty's book room, and his name, yes, Joe Smith, and his name was, he had changed his name. He had taken a Sufi name. "Oh, you've changed your name to Sherdil. Oh, and what do you do?" "Oh, you drive a bus in Birmingham. Oh, how interesting." And then all at once I hear this hoot. "Oh, oh, oh." Kitty had this little British hoot. And then she picked up the receiver. "Huh, are you still there? Are you still there?" I said, "Yes, Kitty. I just thought I'd wait to see if you'd remember that I had called." "Oh, I'm talking to Joe Smith, and well, he's changed his name to Sherdil. He's taken a Sufi name, and he drives a bus in Birmingham, and, well, he's much more interesting than you are."
Which was her apology for why she forgot Cathy on the phone.
I knew what she meant, it was. So that's a good Kitty phone story. Oh.
Well, also, Kitty would end by saying, if you were sort of chatting away with her and it was getting too long and it was going on and on, her way of getting off the phone was she would say to you, "Well, I'll let you go now," meaning she wanted to get off the phone, but she was too polite to say that, so she would always say, "Well, I'll let you go now."
Yes.
So
One of the most important parts of this connection with Lois and Kitty is that, Lois edited Love Alone Prevails. And I just think that it would be wonderful if Lois could share some of those stories about working with Kitty on Kitty's book.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Well, the way that started, when I first started helping Kitty, again in '77, when I came to Baba, I loved the Awakener articles, her articles in the Awakener magazine, and she had written these incredible stories about being with Baba, and they were written up in the Awakener the Awakener magazine, and I just loved those stories. I read all of them, and they were not in any kind of order. They were just, as Kitty would say, higgledy-piggledy, as far as what year that it came out in the Awakener, different issues. So one day I said to Kitty, I loved your Awakener articles. If you would like me to, I could type them up into a little booklet of just Awakener articles. And she thought that was a nice idea. She thought it was a great idea. So I started typing up, and I said in chronological order. That was the point, that I could type them into chronological order so they would flow better. And so she liked that idea. So I started typing them. In those days, it was a typewriter. Everything had to be done on a typewriter. We didn't have the luxury of Word, Microsoft Word. And then Kitty, so I started typing them, and it was a nice little project. And then Kitty would come out with like a box of documents. And she'd say, you know, I found these documents, maybe you could work them into the story, because it was material that Baba had asked her to keep all the material from the Westerners when Kitty came back to the United States. And so Kitty had all the letters from Will and Mary Beckett and the other older devotees and all kinds of material and everything. So she gave me this box of material, and I said, sure, I could work that in. So I started working it in. And then just about every day, she would go into her closet in her bedroom and pull out suitcases. She had a lot of suitcases in the closet, and they were not full with clothes. They were filled with this material that she'd had for years and years and years, 30 years, for 20, 30 years of material. And she kept giving me all this original material and saying, well, do you think you could work this in? And I'd say, well, I'll try, Kitty, I'll try. And I had to type it over, because you had to just, you know, you couldn't use something that would work it in for you online. So I'd start retyping everything and retype and retype and retype. And finally I just said, well, Kitty, let's find all the material, and maybe I could work in it. Maybe I think it would be a nice book. So she thought it would be a good book. And so a lot of the material, the original material, was actually signed letters from Meher Baba. And of course, I didn't want to work with the original material, and it was very fragile. And of course, I got to handle all these signed letters, not only to Kitty, but signed letters to the other devotees that Kitty was asked to keep. So it actually took me a year to organize this, to photocopy this material so I could work with it. And I thought, well, how am I going to photocopy this material? It turned out that someone that many of you know, Bill Files, was working. He was, I think he was an engineer, I think. Anyway, he had an office in a sound engineer. Mm-hmm. And he said, so I was talking to him about it, and he said, well, you could come to the radio station. He worked for a radio station. He said, well, why don't you come to the radio station after work, and you can do the photocopying there, and they'll only charge you $0.01 a page, which was a pretty good deal. So I would go there several times a week, pretty often, and take stacks and stacks of this original material, and then just for hours, just photocopy it and photocopy and photocopy it. And what happened in that time frame of a year that it took literally a year to even before we could start on the book, to just photocopy the material, the photocopier caught on fire. And it caught on fire, not when I was working on it, the next day, after working with Baba's original signed material. The photocopier 3 times caught on fire the next day. And they would have it brought in a repair person, and the repair person would be totally perplexed. And he kept saying, I can't find anything wrong. I can't find anything wrong. I don't know why this copier is catching on fire. Well, eventually the copier had to go to another form, and they had to retire the copier because they could not figure out why it was catching on fire. And it was only after I worked with the original material the next day. It never caught on fire any other time. And one time I said to Kitty, I told her that, and I said, I told her about the copier catching on fire, and she said very often there was fire connected with Baba's work. She said fire was connected with Baba's work very often. So that was the start of Dilruba days. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Love Alone Prevails. I get my books mixed up. And so then my job was to take this material and work it in, and then I would go meet with Kitty in the middle of her day of all this crazy, intense activity. I would talk to her about, well, Kitty, we need an introductory sentence to here, and we need to elaborate a little bit of what you mean here. So gradually, over the years, the book actually was published in 1981, and it took all that time to bring it to fruition. So I was very, very fortunate to work with Kitty on Dilruba Days.
And this is such a perfect segue that I happened to be at work at Dilruba the day that a letter of congratulations on Kitty's recently published book, Love Alone Prevails, you know, had gotten into the hands of Ward Parks, and he had read it and loved it, and he had written a letter to Kitty about how wonderful it was. Kitty was so thrilled because in and of herself, she didn't think of herself as an author, but here was this professor who knew about words and books, and he was lauding her book. And so she was so ecstatic. As I read Ward's letter to Kitty, she turned to me afterwards, and she was just in heaven, in second heaven.
In second heaven.
And she says, oh, I'll have to tell Lois. Of course, you know, Lois edited the book. I'll have to tell Roz. But Roz helped.
Roz Taubman also. She helped edit the letters. The second part of the book is all the correspondence, and Roz helped with that part, and I helped with the early days part.
So she says, I have to tell Lois. I have to tell Roz. It will be a real feather in their cup. So when Dilruba Days, when Lois and my book Dilruba Days came out, I put one feather in my cup. And when I finished Tom's book, I put another feather. So I have two feathers in my cup. So it will be, you have a feather in your cup.
Yes. And of course she meant feather in their cap. But that was one of her charming ways of saying it, was a feather in our cups.
Yes, yes, yes.
Let me see what else I have on here.
Can I tell you a little?
Yes.
I have a little, just Kitty memories. Kitty was so selfless. One day I tried to find Kitty in a selfish moment. I thought to myself, this woman is so phenomenal. I mean, she's just, there's nobody like Kitty. So selfless. I decided to stalk Kitty Davy, and I followed her around Dilruba the whole day, trying to catch her up in a selfish moment. And I have to honestly say, I could not find one moment in which she was self-involved. And it was just this incredible revelation and verification of what we all knew about Kitty. She was, yes. And one or two quick little stories. I decided to stay on the center for a few days, and I told Kitty I was going to go stay on the center, and she says, oh yes, I've heard a stay on the center can be frightfully beneficial. So Lois, to this day, Lois and I will, when something is, we're happy about it, we'll say, oh yes, that sounds frightfully beneficial.
Or frightfully fabulous. And one time, when I was helping Kitty very early on, and I was helping her, I remember I was just with her, and I said, you know, Kitty, everyone envies me that I'm here with you, helping you. And I said, everyone is so envious. And she said, oh, everyone thinks I'm on the 5th plane. You tell them I'm not even on the 1st plane. It was very cute. And then two more. But one time, Kitty went, after lunch, they all whoever was there, Elizabeth, Kitty, Margaret, they would go to rest in their rooms after lunch. And that was a tradition that happened when they were staying with Baba in India, that in the heat of the day after your meal, you go and rest for a few hours. So they continued doing that at Dilruba. And so after lunch, they would go to rest. Excuse me. And before Kitty went to rest one day, she said, now, you tidy up my book room. Just go in there and tidy up the book room and, make it nice and tidy. And then she got up from her rest and she came up to me. She was holding up her wastebasket, holding it up, and she was very agitated. And she held up her wastebasket that was in the book room, and she said, now, why did you empty my wastebasket? Why did you empty my wastebasket? You knew I had something I wanted to keep. Why did you empty my wastebasket? You knew there was something I wanted to keep. And I just said, well, Kitty, I'll look for it. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just felt, well, and then she found it on her desk. But that was kind of typical life at Dilruba. And I used to call it like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, it was just, and you just went with the flow. You just took Baba's name and tried to help as best you could.
And
so, yeah.
A perfect arrival at Dilruba, Elizabeth would call, Kitty would call.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever you went to, the other would tell you how displeased they were that you didn't go to them first. Mm-hmm. So this would often happen, that you were frustrated, blamed. One day in the hallway, I had reached my max, and I walked past Lois, and she must have had smoke coming out of her ears too. And she looked at me and she said,
I said, agony! Because this sounds really funny, but I love Daffy Duck cartoons. And I just love Daffy Duck, and I love Daffy Duck cartoons. And there was a Daffy Duck cartoon where he raised his neck up, and his neck was really high, and he went, agony! So that's what I said to Cathy. That was life at Dilruba. It was just pretty Alice in Wonderland, as I call it. And one more Kitty story, or comment, I guess, is that one time Kitty got up from when she was in her 90s, and she got up from her rest, and she came out of her room, and she said, yes, I find that one can't do the things at 90 that one could do at 80. And I said, Kitty, that's how I feel about 40 and 30. But that was one of my favorite comments. I find one can't do the things at 90 that one could do at 80.
I dragged myself from teaching music to Dilruba one night, and she says, oh, you look a little tired. And, I was like 35 or 40 or something. I don't know. So I said, yes, it's been a busy day. She says, oh, I don't remember feeling tired till I was 60 or 70.
Well, she didn't slow down until she was literally 99, when she had to have a surgical procedure. And she didn't really bounce back after that from that surgical procedure. But I'm not exaggerating. She did not slow down. I've never seen anybody with this kind of energy that she had. And she did not slow down until she was 99. And then she passed away at 100.
And a half.
And a half, yeah, 100 and a half. August, she turned 100 in August of 91 and passed away on December 3rd, actually very recently, anniversary, December 3rd of 1991. So you have... And
just because there were two others who helped tremendously over the years, Dana Ferry and Barbara Katzenberg, and they helped to organize a taking care of Kitty team that a number of us would come and stay during the day. And Dana Ferry and Barbara Katzenberg were very
helpful.
Vital.
And Wendy would come too.
And Wendy.
And Wendy was with her when she passed away, actually. And gradually, as Kitty got older, she needed more help than just Cathy and I could provide, because we could only be there part-time because we had to also support ourselves and earn a living. And so that wonderful, it gave a lot of women the wonderful opportunity to be with Kitty, because at some point it had to be round the clock. And then there was also a night nurse that was near the end, the last 6 months, I guess, there was a night nurse, and then she went very peacefully to Baba, and Wendy Haynes was with her when she went to Baba, and she was taking Baba's name when she passed away. And you couldn't hear her, but she was saying Baba, and Wendy was saying Baba with her, so she totally unique. And then you have your poignant stories.
Oh, I know.
Or not.
Yeah, being around Kitty was so, I don't know, it was so, the power of a presence like that who's totally dedicated, and she doesn't almost exist except for her connection and her love for Mayor Baba. My two favorite passages in this Dilruba Days book that is, I'd say, our book, because it could have never happened without Lois. And I made sure I put edited by Lois Breger on it.
And I have my stories in there too.
Yes, she let me steal some of her stories. Anyway, toward the end of her life, I remember Kitty said the part of this entry, the daylight was waning and Kitty was lying in bed on her side. She had me sit in her chair by her dressing table as she began dictating a response to her friend in India. There was so much love radiating out of her as she lay there, tired and not feeling well. But her spirit was giving out so much love. I was overwhelmed by her concern for this friend and her expressive way of putting together a letter of support and spiritual affirmation. I felt high as a kite by the time we finished. The band of afternoon light that had been falling on my notepad was rapidly disappearing, and by the end of the letter it was gone. But the light from Kitty's love surcharged the room with a different, subtle light. After the letter was finished, she had to say, "Turn on the light, it's getting dark." I hadn't noticed. And the other my most favorite entry was in 1984. Kitty asked me to go with her to the Southeast gathering and to help her at that gathering. And Ward Parks is visiting from India, is another guest speaker at the gathering. In a group discussion led by him this afternoon, Kitty said some amazing things about Baba and her music teaching profession. She explained she felt Baba took it away from her because she was very attached to being a good teacher and making a lot of money. "I was destined for other things," she said. Someone asked Kitty if she felt she had reached the point of love that we'd been discussing, of feeling love for everyone and everything, that omnipresent praise and awareness of Baba and his love in all things at all times, that state to which we are all aspiring. I watched, fascinated, as Kitty really took that very intimate question deeply into her being. She didn't answer for a long time, and everyone was very quiet. She stammered that she had never really thought about that before. Then, thinking very deeply, she slowly said, "I don't really know. All I know is that I am always trying to please Baba, to think what would please him." Her answer was so honest, simple, uncosmic, unmystical. It revealed to me the essence of the nature of the spiritual life. Kitty really isn't feeling inundated with bliss and universal waves of love. In quote, in parentheses, maybe at times, who knows, close parentheses. But she is always, always putting Baba first. She is thinking first of what would please Baba constantly, constantly. It really affected me on a deep level. She went on to say how important and how beautiful the word please is. how it is very necessary and desirable to try in our lives to please Baba and make him happy. She said Baba would never say thank you to something one of his lovers had done for him. He would only say he was pleased with one's love or pleased with what one had done.
Music.
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah. So we were wondering if I should we show the slides or have the song that Elizabeth liked, or what would be good to do? What would be a nice way to follow? I don't know. Let's see.
Either one seemed to be appropriate. There was one thing I wanted to ask you as you were talking about the end of Kitty's life. I don't know where I heard this. It might have been Barbara, but there was a story about everybody sitting in a room with Kitty. Their women were there, and Kitty was getting close to the end of her life. And she finally looked around and said, "Are we waiting for me to die?"
I wasn't there.
She did say that. Yes.
Uh-huh.
And then she said, "Well, let's have a party." And then everybody, I just remember these photographs of people with noses on like cats. I mean, they painted they had whiskers, and everybody just kind of dressed up and had a party with Kitty.
No. Were you there, Lois?
Not at that, but she did say that another time about, I heard about that also.
Okay, I just wondered.
No,
And
I heard about that, yeah.
it's always just touched my heart. And I just wish that when my time comes, I'm able to do that.
Let's have a party.
Yeah.
Let's have a party.
Oh, Baba, that's wonderful.
So it's up to you. If you want the photos, just let me know and I'll.
The song and the photos
song?
together.
Okay,
Can we do
okay.
it together?
Oh, yeah. So I was thinking maybe I could sing the Song of the Soul while the photos were being played. Is that possible?
Lovely, yeah.
Yeah. So very quick story is that I used to some of us took turns driving Elizabeth to the Methodist church downtown. And it was just amazing sitting next to this disciple of the Christ in, the Methodist church that her father had endowed downtown in downtown Myrtle Beach. One day, a young woman who had been hired as the assistant minister preached a fabulous sermon. Then she says, "I'm going to sing a song." And she whipped out a guitar and she sang the Song of the Soul. And, the chorus says, "Why don't you sing along?" Of course, nobody in the church knew it, but I did because we sang it at the center. And so I was humming and trying not to hum. And Elizabeth must have heard me. And on the way home, she said, "Do you know that song, dear?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Would you sing it?" So I sang it as we drove back to Dilruba. And after that, she would periodically, with people coming, she said, "Well, Cathy, could you sing that song?" And I just start singing the Song of the Soul.
She loved it.
And she loved that song. So I think it'd be nice to sing it while we have a couple of photos that we had picked from Dilruba days to show while I sing. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. Is that okay? So, yeah. Love of my life, I am sighing, I am not crying, I am dancing, dancing along in the madness. There is no sadness, only the song of the soul. Let's sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. What do you do for a living? Are you forgiving? Giving shelter. Follow your heart, love will find you. The truth will unbind you and sing out the song of the soul. Let's sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Come to your life like a warrior, nothing will bore you. You can be happy. Let in the light, it will heal you, and you can feel you, and sing out the song of the soul. And let's sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. And we can sing for a long, long time.
Jai Baba.
Mm-hmm.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Jai Baba.
Thank you.
On that last picture, was that you, Kathy, sitting or standing?
I can't remember what was the last
With
picture.
Kitty?
Yeah.
I think,
That's the, you mean this one?
yeah, the one on the back of, yeah, that's me with Kitty.
She's
I
sitting.
don't know, there are 3 people.
Oh, 3 people. Can
Oh.
you go back? I don't know what, let's see. Whoopsie doodle.
Mhm.
Sorry, Ruthie.
Let's see.
You know how these demanding Baba people can be.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one it
Um,
was. It might have been Kitty, Evelina and me.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was in the kitchen. Kitty and
Was it
Kitty Elizabeth, Kitty
Evelina?
Evelina and Lois, maybe? Was that the one?
In the kitchen? Was
I
it in
don't
the
know
kitchen?
Evelina and I don't know Lois.
So this is
Okay,
me.
can you
I
want
mean, I know you, Lois, sorry.
Yeah, let me see if I can get it. I don't know why sometimes the
Well, if you want to show them, we can identify what's going on.
Yeah, that would be great, just to go
Yeah.
slow.
and I am so with you on this.
Mhm.
If I could only get it to come up again. Hang on.
Mm,
Yeah, I know.
I
Yeah,
love
it was-
that with the music and the slides.
yeah, it's so nice bringing it back to.
But we have time. We could just explain,
Uh-huh.
like Jimmy in the corner, you know, the one with
Mhm.
Margaret. And, you
Oh
know.
my goodness gracious. He won't
Yeah.
even open the photos for me. Hold on. Let me start out.
I can't remember 3 people.
Tar,
I think that was
Baba.
Kitty, Evelina, and me.
Yeah, I think that was Lois with
There we
Evelina
go.
and
All right.
Kitty in the kitchen.
Hang tight. I got it again. So here we'll just go through them and then you can.
Yeah, we can tell you more about them if you're interested.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so that was the cover, you know, of
Yeah.
Dilruba Days.
And that was on the back porch. where we had many, many meals and many talks and fun times.
The back porch at the guest house?
Yeah.
No, it
No, at Dilruba.
Oh, Dilruba, sorry, of course.
and
And you
well, we were in India together, Lois and I, and
73, I think it was.
So that's
73.
Mansari, and which one?
I'm
Cathy
yeah, Cathy and Lois.
and
Yeah,
Lois.
just in our wrinkle-free years.
Was that 72 or 73?
73,
73, yeah. And there we are with Mansari.
So Lois is in the white.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Kathy's
you.
on the left.
Yes, and the next one is, we had a birthday party for Evelina, who was working for so many years for Kitty. And so Barbara Katzenberg, Evelina, Dana Ferry, myself, and Lois met and, made a big cake, and Evelina was very happy. And she would talk about the Baba, because her husband's mother was really was devoted to
Bessie
Baba.
Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Evelina would say, I cooked for the Baba. She called him the Baba.
Yeah, Bessie, her mother-in-law cooked, I think all 3 years, 52, 56, and 58 for Baba. And others in the party as well.
And one day Evelina said, I just had a dream. I remember I had a dream after Elizabeth passed. I saw a very young Elizabeth running toward a man in a long white robe and falling into his arms. And I said, Evelina, that's Baba. And she just hadn't really thought about who that was. And
But she said yes.
Yes, yeah. Oh.
Well, that's one of the center programs in the meeting place. And I was helping, well, I'm not sure if I did some programs, but I don't think I was performing that one, but I was with Kitty because we would escort her from Dilruba to the program and then back to Dilruba. And then she would give us ice cream. So that's at a meeting place that I think it was after the program, whatever the program was.
I think this was her 98th birthday.
Yes, you're right. That was the 98th birthday party. You're absolutely right. Yeah. We had a big party and a lot of entertainment and the meeting place for Kitty. And I did a children's program, and Mary Lloyd Dugan did a program, and you probably sang, I'm sure. So that's what's going on there.
Beautiful.
That's Kitty at 98. Can you believe it?
Mm-hmm.
We have so much.
And a friend visiting from Massachusetts just snapped this picture. It just is, I don't know, Kitty is,
And that's you.
I don't know, what can you say? She would wear those beautiful, you remember, those of you who knew her, she would wear those little mittens that her fingers would come out the ends.
Well, she had arthritis, so
Yeah.
finger arthritis.
And
So, of
that's
course,
you, Kathy, right?
That's me.
Yeah. And of course, that's the image on the back cover of Dilruba Days.
I can just feel those.
And
Yeah.
that's in the
Go to
that was-
school in Massachusetts.
What? Who? What?
Didn't you go to school in Massachusetts?
Yeah. I went to Brandeis University, and that's where I met Annie Weld Bell, my Baba contact. So that's why I went
and
to.
this picture's in the dining room at Dilruba.
Very Jewish.
You explain that one.
So, sometimes Jimmy got to, whoops,
Sorry.
Jimmy got to go outside and walk around in the compound. And
He got some exercise.
yeah, so he was being supervised, I guess, by Margaret and Kitty.
Yeah, Jimmy, as you can see him down in the lower right corner, that's Jimmy walking around.
God, they must have been a trip.
They were.
And this picture,
A sitcom in here.
Sorry.
that picture right there, that was taken by a person who was coming to visit them, and they were greeting him.
With Jimmy.
Yeah, and Jimmy's walking around.
Oh, golly.
Thanks for doing this. It's wonderful.
Right, there's one, yeah.
Oh,
Is that the one you were talking about, the three people?
Oh, no.
that's gorgeous Lois,
Mhm.
wonderful Kitty, and fabulous Evelina in the kitchen at Dilruba.
No, and
Mm.
this picture, Kitty was actually 99 before she had the
On
surgery.
Hill.
Wow.
And that was a Christmas dinner that Evelina would prepare the Christmas dinner every year. And so Kitty was in the kitchen supervising the dinner, and somehow I ended up in the picture too. I'm not sure how.
And talking about 99, I had learned a spiritual called 99, 99, 99 and a half won't do. I'm out there, Lord, I'm trying to reach 100. 99 and a half won't do. So Evelina and I sang it for Kitty for her leading up to her 100th birthday.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
I know that song.
You know?
It's
Oh,
a wonderful
good.
song. Yeah, I know that song. Someone else
Oh,
did it.
good, good, good.
And I'll tell you a
Yeah.
little story if you have time. The Christmas dinners, Kitty, people all year long would give Kitty little gifts, little token gifts, like a jar of jam or some, little something, hand soap or something, and just visiting over the years and give. So Kitty would hoard these gifts. So she'd have about 25 people that would come for dinner this one time, every year, Christmas dinner. And Kitty wanted to give them little gifts, so she had her stack of little token gifts. Well, she didn't want to just hand out the token gifts because they were so nothing much gifts. So somehow she would ask me to come up with some kind of way to entertain the guests and let them take their gifts. And so we came up with little like question contests and puzzles. And I remember one time they had to reach under their chair and get a number, and then the number corresponded with when they could go pick a gift or whatever. But she just wanted it to be a little more entertaining than just handing a wrapped bar of soap to somebody. And I have to say that every year I had to try to come up with something entertaining. And then I was so relieved after that Christmas because I had 364 more days to figure out the next
Oh
entertainment.
my God.
But she just counted on us to help, and we did. We just, there wasn't any point being there. We were being there trying to please them, and that was pleasing to Baba. And I always felt there was no point in my being with Baba if I wasn't trying to please Baba. So by helping Kitty and pleasing Kitty and Elizabeth and Margaret, and Cathy felt the same way, we were pleasing Baba. So that, of course, was very important to us. So we just did whatever, we tried to rise to whatever the occasion was, and a lot of it was pretty challenging.
Yeah, she'd asked me from earliest times to, MC the Baba birthday programs at the center, and I was terrified. But I mean, that's how I just got used to standing up in front of people because, it's like the next warm body syndrome. Lois and I were there and she'd ask us to do it,
We did.
Oh, this is
No,
this is the cat.
one of the 7 cats.
One of the 7 cats. Was this the calico?
Yeah.
Okay, so the funny story about the calico
We'll
cat.
say who the people are.
Oh, Barbara Katzenberg and myself and Kitty in her book room in her office with the calico cat, who used to always meow and sort of be underfoot. And when I was cooking, the cat would inadvertently, I would sort of step on the cat and it would scream, and then I think I probably did swear at the cat. And Kitty finally called me into her book room and she said, "Now, dear, that cat was taken away from its mother when it was very young, and he got fixed, and he never had any fun, and then so you have to try to be more loving to that cat. You have to really, realize that cat needs love." So I would try very hard to be more loving to the cat. And then this is very funny after Mass to this calico cat story, which is that when Lois and I decided to put that entry into the book was published, and I got a call from Dee Dee
Oh, Dee Mavericks.
Dee Mavericks, and she was a vet, and she said, I have to tell you, you say that Kitty said he got fixed and he never had any fun. She said calico cats are 99.5% female. So Lois and I decided, were we going to go back in when we had the second edition, and were we going to change this calico cat from a male to a female? But then it just didn't read, you know, he never had any fun, she never had any fun. So we just decided to leave it a he, but just to let you all know, this cat is a she.
Well, it might have been the one exception that calico was a he.
Yeah.
We're assuming it was the one exception.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you with your long hair.
Oh, yeah, that's the days of yore.
Your hair back.
Oh, yeah.
Any more slides? Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, the back cover. of
And
course.
those of you who are from the, if you go back one to the full, anyway, the cover, I have to say thank you to Monica and Bob Ochtrop in the Minneapolis area who helped with that cover and using that photo, which was Bob Ochtrop's photo. And Lois for having edited the book. And
Oh,
thank
thank you.
you
Thank you.
everybody so much for,
Thank you
Thank you.
yeah.
for our wonderful get together.
Yeah.
Kathy, did you ever know how the Chris Williamson song got to Elizabeth? Because we know her from the lesbian women's community.
Well, because of, did you hear the story about the church hearing the woman minister singing?
Yeah.
Oh,
And-
no,
and- Okay, so I took Elizabeth to church, and a newly hired young woman preached a fabulous sermon, then got up and sang the Song of the Soul, and I knew it, but tried not to sing because nobody else in the church knew it but me. But Elizabeth heard me humming, and I sang it to her on the way home at her request. And subsequently, she would ask me to sing it around the house when people came. And actually, just a little postscript for you both is that I took a songwriter's workshop with Chris Williamson and had the opportunity to go over to her and say, I love your song, the Song of the Soul. We sing it at the Mayor Baba Center. Have you heard about Mayor Baba? And she had. So that was a wonderful, connection with her, actually.
You know, she's still on the planet and she does these concerts on Zoom.
On Facebook.
Amazing.
Wow,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, we were with her a couple of years ago on a women's cruise that was amazing, and she performed for us.
And it's just so wonderful having that specific song be part of this.
It just gives us goosebumps every time we hear it, because we've only been with Baba like how many years? 11 years, and that comes from our young years. So it's
Yeah, she
really
told
brings
me
it all together for us.
she told me that she said when that song just almost like downloaded into her, and she was crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, and she said she just luckily had a pen and paper, and she wrote down some of the notes of the words, and then. But I always felt so happy that I could talk to her about Baba and that song, and that she knew of him, and that was very meaningful to me.
Uh-huh.
And
I think it's the only song that exists that both Diane and I can sing to. Not very well, but we know the words. It's not a la la la. We actually know the words. So
and
it means a lot to us. So thank you.
it's sung quite often at Mayor Baba's Samadhi, even to this day, at Artie's and so forth. So it made its way. And Chris Williamson, I first met in when the Dalai Lama made his first trip to the West and gave a 2-week-long deep special initiation in Wisconsin. And there were less than 100 of us people there, and Chris was one of them. So she
lives up by you.
She lives with you, Judy.
What's that?
She lives in Seattle.
Does she really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or outside Seattle, but yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know that.
So Wayne, you could go visit her.
Yeah.
I want to say to both Cathy and Lois, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh,
Your
thank you
stories
for joining
have
us.
been-
We
it's
love
abs-
telling our stories. It makes us relive it and we reminisce about it. And we get together. Kathy and I are very close friends, and we get together as often as we can.
Good.
Well,
we're
and
close-
laughed more this afternoon than I've laughed in, I can't even remember when.
that was our goal. That was our
We
goal.
decided not to
They
tell
were
too many
talking-
kittyisms because we just, we didn't have enough time, so we could do a whole kittyism Zoom sometime.
Sometime, yeah.
I just wanted to also have a big shout out to Elaine Morton.
Oh,
for putting
wonderful.
this
That's
together.
great. You know, I'm recently retired, and I grew up in Massachusetts, and we say bathroom. That was the family. And every time I'd say, I'll be right back, I'm going to the bathroom. And everybody at the front desk would go, bathroom, just going to the bathroom. So when you do it, I think it's our age, and it feels like family, you know, like it makes me feel even more connected. So I can't thank you enough for doing this work. I really appreciate it.
I wanted to say special thanks to Elaine Munson, who was the one who said, let's do a Zoom,
Yes.
and was the initial perpetrator. Who was the inspiration for this Zoom. So thank you, Elaine.
Yeah, thank you.
And Wayne has his hand up.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
great. This was just incredible. I've heard stories I've not heard before. It's just wonderful, Lois and Cathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Cathy, when you were talking about just now about the Song of the Soul by Chris Williamson, and that she, it came to her crossing the Golden Gate Bridge, just came to her. Well, I just have to point out on the end of May 1958, Baba's last day in America ever, he crossed the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh my God. Whew. He left the
He
song
stayed
for
at the
her.
center in 58 and flew to California. I think it was, I'm going to say May 30th. Stayed at the Dimples house in Marin County, which is, of course, north of the Golden Gate. That's the last place he stayed. And then the morning of May 31st, 58, I'm pretty sure I have the date right, but it's very close. Ludd and drove Baba in Mondelez to the San Francisco airport across the Golden Gate Bridge to the San Francisco airport, where they flew off to,
Oh my God.
with a stop in Honolulu, flew off to Australia.
Oh.
That was the last day Baba was in America.
So shall we tell Chris Williamson that Baba left a song for her on the Golden Gate Bridge?
I think so.
That you can, please. Baba left us all songs. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Thank you
Jai
for,
Baba.
that's wonderful.
Well,
Wayne,
what a
thanks.
wonderful
Yeah.
story. Oh.
Wonderful.
God.
Takes me back. I was visiting friends in that neighborhood, and if I had Dimple's address correct from our literature, I went up to see the house and see the views that Baba had.
What year was that, Corinne?
2008. I I thought I was going to go visit all my old friends, and I made a list of all the places in the Bay Area that I could find that Baba had been. And I was spending all my time on buses and going around looking for these places.
Wonderful. Oh, our wonderful avatar.
Lud Dimple, since we're mentioning him, I came to Baba in Berkeley the day Baba dropped his body. And in those years, Lud would come to our Baba League meetings quite often, like once or twice a month, and tell just so many stories. And you know, this is separate from his Sufi connections as a preceptor there. But he was so available and had, like you two, so many humorous stories. He had a great sense of humor and shared so openly and abundantly of his love and his experiences with Baba. So he's somebody that I love the fact those people with with great senses of humor. And it was mentioned, Margaret Craske. She had one of the best senses of humor I've ever met. And Baba loved whoever had a great sense of humor, and because, of course, with him, it helped him get relief from all of this universal work that he was doing for all of us. And, anyway, it's a delight to be able to share all of these things with one another.
Just thinking about all the years of Kittyisms and everybody's funny stories, I mean, that must have relieved Baba's, yeah.
Well, they loved kitties, the Mandali in India, after Baba went to Baba. They loved kitties. Well, even when especially when Kitty was there in India, they absolutely, Mani would say how much they loved her kittyisms and her sense of humor and her unique way of wording things. And they just really
one of the ones that I don't know if she didn't tell me, but that she was trying to learn Marathi and she was cooking, and she said in Marathi, to the cooks, let me know when you're finished, but that verb that she used was let me know when you're dead, finished, when your life is finished. So she was even doing kittyisms in Marathi,
in a foreign language.
And I was over in India, I had the good fortune of kind of doing what you guys were doing, but in India with the Mandali there. And it happens that Dr. Ann and I took a rickshaw into the trust office just at the time when we were there, when the phone rang from Dilruba telling Mani and Balna too. I think Erich was at Marazad, but at the trust office that Kitty had just passed. And what I experienced was this sense of joy and liberation that the Mandali and expressed with her passing, rather than grief and loss, but just this, she brought joy to everybody, and I mean, and Mani would remember back to the great times of when Kitty was there with them, and Elizabeth and Narina and all of them, but Kitty in particular, Mani delighted in because of, you can imagine the two of them together. Sparkling.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, everybody.
I think you ladies should do a Kitty Tales Zoom.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to
ring off.
I'll twist her arm again. I'm going to Asheville in January.